And that gives you a real life example of an actual seller who was willing to sell subject to and the kinds of questions she had. And that was on a scale of like 1 to 10, in terms of 10 being like a very difficult seller with lots of objections. I'd say that was maybe like a 7, maybe an 8. We've had worse. We've been grilled for sure, but all right, welcome back to the Subto Investor Show. This is Hans, and this is part of the Subto Real Deal Breakdown series, where I am going through real-life subject to deals that we have closed and walking you through A to Z. We've now done more than 24 of these in under 2 years and have leased or leased to owned or sold on contract for deed more than 30 of these. And so this is episode 3 of deal 1 in the Real Subto Deal Breakdown playlist. So if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes where I discuss where our very first deal came from, and then go back and watch the previous 2 videos. But part of the process of doing subject to transactions and doing them regularly is getting super comfortable with responding to the objections that sellers will bring. And there are probably like maybe a dozen of objections, questions that the sellers have, or reasons that they may not want to do the subject to deal. So in this video, I will be showing you an email correspondence and with an actual seller and the questions that she had, and I'll be showing you how I responded to them. Now I'll point out where I erred and how I could have done better. So getting to the email. Now we had sent her a pack of documents that we were going to have her sign at closing. It's a standard procedure for us, and we emailed that to her several days before closing, so she has plenty of time to look through the documents and so that she can go into this with eyes wide open so that there are no surprises at the closing table. So having reviewed those documents, she emailed us and said, "Hello Hans, I've read through the documents. I have a question about the seller's mortgage disclosure statement. So I will still be attached to the mortgage, but I will not own the property?" That is a very common question. You're telling me you're going to buy the house, take over the mortgage payments. Does that mean I'm still the owner of the house? Man, you'd be amazed how many times I get that question. So it's very important to clarify in your own mind that you are buying this property. You're taking title to it. You're getting the deed to the house. This is not a lease option. You are buying the house, and that's going to be reflected on the county records. You're just taking over the mortgage payments, and your job is to help the seller understand that as well if there's any question at all about it. She also asks, will this still be on my credit, and for how long? Very good question. I had already told her that we'll be buying the house, we'll be keeping your loan in place, making payments on it. It will reflect on your credit as well, but take this as a lesson. Even though you said it one time to the homeowner, the chances are you're going to need to say it at least a second time, maybe a third time before it sinks in, and you want it to sink in so there are no hidden surprises down the road for you. So I respond to her, that's right. It's a normal sale, just the mortgage stays in place until we sell the property and it gets paid off when we sell. But after 12 months of us making the payments, which will help build your credit by the way, federal guidelines say that the mortgage can no longer count against you in your debt to income ratio if you go to apply for another loan. So after 12 months, in other words, the loan won't count against you. That's all laid out here. Hyperlink to the Fannie Mae website that just talks about this, which is an awesome thing to know and a good nugget to have in your back pocket when you're handling these objections. I do this typically, and as a matter of course, I always stress that this is a normal sale that's taking place. There's nothing off or weird about this transaction. It's just that the mortgage is going to stay in place. Sometimes to help them see what I mean, I'll say, look, we even get a title insurance policy. It is normal to do, except we have an exclusion of this mortgage on our title policy, so we're not getting insured for that. But everything else, it's a normal sale. Now, I And then I affirm that the mortgage does stay in place, but it will get paid off when we go to sell. And probably looking back on this, I would have stressed that I don't know when we're going to sell. I don't know when that mortgage is going to get paid off, because the last thing you want is a seller coming back to you saying, well, you said that it might get paid off in 3 or 4 or 5 years. So it's been 3 years now. Like, going back, one thing I should have put into this answer of mine is, look, it gets paid off when we sell, but there's no guarantee as to when that might be. It could be your maturity date, like 28 years out at the end of the loan, like that. It might go that long. You want to be honest, and you don't want to make a promise that you can't keep, or even make a suggestion or hinting towards the fact that it might get paid off sooner. Set them up with the expectation that this could go full maturity date, and we just can't predict the future. We don't know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. But the thing that I do know is that Fannie Mae says this about the debt being discounted off your DTI after 12 months, and it will build your credit. Those things I can, in fact, guarantee to you. She responds back and says, thank you for clarifying. And then I respond back and just emphasize that your credit will be built over time as we make the payments. And we hope that that will help you if you ever decide to apply for another loan in the near future. And that is absolutely the case. It will help her. In fact, she had been behind on mortgage payments for a period of time. And so she's probably thinking about her credit score. And then she replied with another question. She says, one more question, since the power of attorney only applies to the mortgage itself. Now, let me just pause there. Included in our closing packet is a limited power of attorney, which gives us control over the loan. And this is really meant for those rare events where maybe the mortgage is being transferred, or maybe something funky is happening with the insurance. So she's asking if that power of attorney, since it only applies to the mortgage, it's limited, right? Are the liens still attached to the house, or are they still in my name as well? And if the house is sold, will I still have to deal with the liens later down the line? That's a good question. It's a pretty deep question. She's thinking about this, you can tell. And let's see how I responded. I said, good morning. The liens are attached to the house and not to you individually. When we complete a sale of the house to a new buyer, those liens will need to be paid off and released for the new buyer to have clear title. But for the time being, the mortgage remains in your name. Once again, my friends, let me pause here. Do not shy away from this fact. Make sure they understand this. She just wants to know, could this come back on me? And the answer to that is no. Once we sell the house, all of the liens will get paid off. She says, that does answer my question. So what I want to know, since your company is looking for another buyer, once I have signed and closed, if the leasers or whoever reside in the property were to cause damage, or if something external happens to the property, will I still be financially liable for the property? Now, this is a somewhat common question that we get. Okay, I'm selling my house to you. You're taking over my loan payments, but you put a tenant in there and they destroy the property. Can that come back to me? And I don't know if this question comes from the fact that maybe she was pitched a lease option sale from another investor, which if that were the case, then the answer would be yes. And here's a good opportunity to differentiate yourself from those lease option people out there who are doing sandwich lease options. You are coming in as a real buyer who's going to take title to the property immediately and have ownership. She's worried about having to deal with the house, having somehow to be still involved with the property. And knowing what I know now, I know that a lot of sellers are like that. For whatever reason, they just want to be done with the house. And if that's the case, usually it is, just go out of your way to make that point emphatic. Let's see how I do. Good question. No, you will not be liable for the actual property itself in any way, since ownership will be transferring to us. We'll be responsible for taxes, insurance, utilities, any repairs, etc. It's a normal sale. Again, I love emphasizing that. It's just that we're leaving the loan in place. That's the only exception to it being a normal sale. She responds, thank you for clarifying. after my last experience dealing with some not so nice people. So here you go. I don't know if she had rented the house out or if she had some contractors go south on her or something, but she had a bad experience. She says, after dealing with some not so nice people, I'm just making sure I fully understand things before I sign anything and move halfway across the country. Thank you again for answering my questions. I say, I totally get that. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to let me know. And then she responds, here's the final objection that she has. She says, I'll need a form stating that your company will be assuming payments of the loan as well as will be paying off the liens. I know the loan is staying in place in my name, but I must protect my best interest before turning over the property. I want this all in writing. Now, we had to get her on the phone at that point and explain to her there was a few points of clarification that we needed to make. One is that this is not a technical assumption, and we don't want to use the language of loan assumption because that is an actual thing that happens. That's where you go out and qualify with the homeowner's lender to take personal responsibility for that debt and have it transferred to your name and to your credit report and all that stuff. And that's not what Subject 2 is. First of all, we got to clear that up. We're not assuming the loan. We are just making payments on the loan. What she wanted here was some documents giving her recourse in the event that we defaulted on the mortgage payment. And that's another major objection that we get is what if you don't make the mortgage payments? And the short answer to that is just be brutally honest. Well, Mrs. Seller, if I don't make the mortgage payment, then that will tank your credit. And if I continue not to make the mortgage payment, then the bank will foreclose on the property. You got to be brutally honest because there's no way around that hard truth. And it's better that they know that now. Let's say they come to find out after they sell to you, and it wasn't clear to them, and they begin freaking out and trying to get the property back. That's the absolute last thing that you want. If they're going to walk away from this deal, it's better that they do it sooner so that you don't end up expending a ton of time and energy. But you got to be brutally honest. It's the right thing to do. It also helps foster trust. And in this instance, we provided a seller recourse form in our closing packet that basically states that if we default on the mortgage payment, that she would have the right to regain possession of the property because that was something that was important to her. Now, we don't always include that in our closing pack because some sellers are so afraid of the property ever coming back to them. They almost don't care that we make the mortgage payments. We will make the mortgage payments. They just are so done with a property that they're like, any talk of giving the property back to them, they're like, I don't want to do this. So we won't even include that form with sellers like that. But there are 40% of the people that we do sub-twos with want some form of reassurance that they have recourse if our company goes belly up and we stop making the mortgage payments, and totally reasonably so we provide them recourse. So those are some objections. Those are not all the objections we encounter. Certainly there's more, and I will discuss those, but hopefully that gives you a real life example of an actual seller who was willing to sell subject to and the kinds of questions she had. And that was on a scale of like 1 to 10, in terms of 10 being like a very difficult seller with lots of objections. I'd say that was maybe like a 7, maybe an 8. We've had worse. We've been grilled for sure, but I'd say she had some good questions. And actually what happened with this one was, I think the day before closing, she had these documents reviewed by an attorney, apparently. She had some more questions, and we had to get on the phone the day beforehand and just really, I don't know, give her assurance that we were going to perform. But she had no equity and really wanted to get out of this property. And we have made those payments. Now it's almost been 22 months of making those payments. So I bet her credit's sitting pretty nice right now. If I were to summarize this, how do you talk to motivated potential subject to sellers? The short answer is with brutal honesty and transparency. That's the only way to be. And obviously you want to highlight the benefits of selling subject to, namely you are getting top dollar for your house. There's no way you could get this much on the market or with a cash investor. Your credit will be built over time, and you are in no way connected to the physical property anymore. It's always a great approach to take with your seller and to say, look at Mr. or Mrs. Seller, if you're not comfortable with any of my answers to your questions or with the nature of this transaction in any way, I need to know now because I'm not comfortable closing this deal. If you're not comfortable, are you okay with this? If not, speak now so that we can just part ways. If you put it to them that way, first of all, it's going to separate the motivated from the unmotivated, the wheat from the chaff, to put it in biblical terms. So if you like this video, take a quick second just to boop the like button, and please subscribe to this channel. Continue to be creative. Peace out.